Hi everyone, and welcome to your first workshop walkthrough. This first one we're going to be working with abstract forms and to sort of start to try and develop our ability to create a vocabulary, but a vocabulary of ideas and of forms, but through a visual perspective. So rather than using words and sort of rewriting definitions, instead we're going to define ideas through just making abstract shapes out of collages. So before I get started, I wanted to talk to you about a few of the materials that we're going to be working with. We're going to be working with what you see here. What we have here is I have a metal ruler here. So you'll need to purchase one of these. I have a cutting mat. This is a self-healing cutting mat. This is a particular small one. I think I would suggest that when you purchase this, you purchase a larger sized one. You will be using that. You'll be using that a lot more frequently when you get into other classes, when you're working in 3D, when you're cutting foam core. So I think in general, it's a good thing to have a cutting mat that's usually the size of your desk. And then lastly, the last sort of additional material that you're going to need or tool you're going to need is you're going to need some sort of cutting implement. And no, a knife will not do. So what I'm going to suggest is you can have a blade like this. This is an Olfa blade. It's a little bit big. It's good. It's a good one to have. The ones that I prefer to use generally are your standard circular X-Acto knife. I don't have a blade in here right now. Or a smaller Olfa blade like this one. This is an Olfa blade that I particularly like. There's a few rules, like we're going to be cutting things, we're going to be using really sharp blades, so obviously you have to watch wherever you're going. We're going to be cutting largely in straight lines, and what that means is always making sure that your fingers are out of the way of the direction that you're going. So let's get started. Right here, one of the ways to keep, this is a counterintuitive little detail, but this is a good thing to remember, is one way to always keep, not to guarantee, but to safeguard your safety, is make sure that your blades are sharp, because cutting with a dull blade, you're more likely to cut yourself with a dull blade than with a sharp blade. And the nice thing about Olfas is that you can actually, they're built in to have a little tool for actually breaking off old blades like this. Make sure that's out of the frame. And then you have a sharp blade like you do right there. Nice and sharp. Good. Yeah. So, now what you'll have seen is online I posted a PDF called worksheet.pdf, and what I'd like you to do is print that out, and I have my copy here. It's 3 pages. It's a white square, and then in black, although my printer seems to be dying, and then in black some basic shapes, otherwise known as primitives. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using these black shapes to collage using this white square as our crop area. So one other thing that I would suggest you get is one additional piece of paper. Just a blank piece of paper that we'll be using for our background. So now we've got everything we need. Let's get started. So I'm going to start off by just cutting out the square. Now with these rulers, you'll notice that mine, I've sort of removed some of the cork, or it's wearing away. The cork is good for holding it. For precision reasons, you lose a little bit of the grip. I like to use my ruler upside down. You can just use it the right side up, but I like this just so that I can get very precise. So I'm going to make sure my entire cutting area is on the mat so I don't damage this desk here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line up, starting from the top, the center line as precisely as I can get. I'm going to cut each of these 4 edges to create my basic crop area. So this is the area that we're going to use for our compositions. So now what I have here is I have a crop area. So now what I have here is my crop area. And if I put a sheet of blank white paper underneath my crop area, I can use this to sort of define the edges. So it's inside this space that I will be working with, and I have some edges that I can work from. So now the next phase of what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out all of these shapes. Yes, I am. It's going to take a little bit of time. So maybe what I might do is pause recording, and perhaps I won't do all of them right now, but I will at least start. And I'm expecting you to do all of the shapes. Maybe I'll do this page and then we'll pause recording. So the idea is I'm going to be cutting them all out, so I don't really have to be too precious about the white space, since they don't have to exist after this moment. So I can go through and cut that off. This one, you can see it wasn't quite as well aligned, so I'm going to go in for a second round and make sure this whole side is clean. I'm going to do the same for this side. Let's see, maybe what I'll do is I'll flip this way. Keep going around the edge of this so that all the white is cropped out. So essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm just cutting these black shapes out, and these are going to be the forms and the counterforms that we will be using for creating the structural definitions of some of the terms that we've started to learn from the Christian Laborg reading that we did this week. So all of those terms, volume, depth, plane, rotation, path, all of those terms, we're going to be exploring them, but not in the sense that we're going to try and define them with words. We're going to try and define them with abstract shapes. Now, when I say abstract shapes, I'm not just talking about, or when I'm talking about defining them with form, we're not talking about defining them with images. So when we talk about structural skeleton, which is, I think, a term that wasn't quite in the reading, we're not actually talking about physical skeletons. We're actually talking about the idea of defining these a little bit more in abstraction than with being denotative. Now, what's the difference between denotative and connotative? Denotative is the idea. We're trying to be more connotative, less denotative. Denotative is when you're very literal about a definition of a thing. Connotative is when you're a little less literal. So what you'll see is I'm cutting out each black shape here. We've gotten through 2. And now we can just go through these as quickly as we can. Feels good to cut things. Now, we could be doing this on a computer for sure, but I think before we start learning how the tool does something, I want us to do it in a really, really specific and intentional way. And that's why I like to do this cutout of paper. Also, I have to say, nothing feels quite as good as cutting things out from paper. I'm going to pause recording for a minute. And what I'm going to do now, after that, is I'm going to finish cutting everything, and then we'll come back online. Okay, so now, as you can see, I haven't actually cut out every single thing, but I've got, just in the interest of time for me for this explainer video, but I'm expecting you guys to. So what you'll see is I have, let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 big circles. I have one big black rectangle. I have a whole bunch of smaller rectangles, a whole bunch of smaller squares, and this is enough to get started. So the cutting phase is through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all of the cutting elements out of the frame so that I can just work with my cropping space. Now, what I'm going to do, and what this assignment asks you to do, is to make 12 compositions based on words from the list. So, if you need more pieces, feel free to print more of those worksheets. If you want to cut them up, you totally can. So why don't we just I'll do a couple examples and then I'll show you what I want you to do with them. So the first term I'm going to pick, let me look here. Let's just do radiation. Yeah, we're going to do radiation. Now, when I say the word radiation, Christian Laborg defines it as a radiation is a formal repetitive structure with structure units that are situated around a common center. So I'm not doing anything when I'm trying to define this term radiation. I'm not necessarily trying to define it around like a symbol for radiation. I'm not trying to define it. I'm not trying to draw a picture of a sick person, or I'm not trying to create an illustration from the TV show Chernobyl. Instead, I'm trying to define it based on that idea. So a radiation is that things radiate from the center. So maybe the first thing we need is a center. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just start with, maybe I'll make a center out of this, and I'll make a center maybe I'll make a really complex shape for the center, which will be a series of squares that are overlapping each other to create a kind of more spiky form. Look at that. That looks pretty good as an interesting center. Now, if I wanted to radiate things off of that, look, we have these beautiful thin lines that I can start to use. Maybe what I'll do is I will lift up this cropping piece. I'm going to just start creating a beautiful radiating artifact, speaking to Christian Laborg's definition of radiation. Based on the reading that you've already read and submitted your responses to. Excellent. I'm not doing as complex a job as I could. I'm trying to do this quickly to give you a sense of the demonstration of the process, knowing that you're all busy and you all have things to do. So I might just stop at the next one. Let's see if we can. There we go. Boop, 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 boop. Not bad. Maybe I could sort of we could actually add another layer of complexity to it. Why don't we add a little bit more, slightly more interesting, make this slightly more interesting, shall we? So we make this even more radiant, if you will. Looking pretty active and radioactive. All right. Look, I've run out, but lucky for me, I can use this long piece here, like that. Looks okay. But now when I use this cropping area, let's take a look. How do I want to crop this? Yeah, maybe it needs to be a slightly off from the center of this. Not bad. That looks pretty radiant according to the definition put forth by Christian Laborg. So what I'm going to do now is, as I'm making this video, you're going to see it shimmy a little bit. Come on. I'm going to just take a photo. Are you going to let me take a photo or no? Good. There we go. So let's let it reset itself. Now what I've just done is I've taken a photo with my camera, which is also recording the video right now, thus the shimmying. I've created my first composition, and now that I'm happy with this composition, you'll notice that I didn't glue down my collage because I want to be able to reuse these pieces again. So if I decide to do a second, or so now that I'm going to do a second composition, this is what I will do now. So why don't we pick another term here? Let's grab subtraction. Perfect. So according to Christian Laborg, subtraction is when part of an object that overlaps another one is deducted from the underlying object. A subtraction has taken place. So again, I could very easily, if somebody said, create a visual form, an abstract collage that represents subtraction, we have a symbol for subtraction as opposed to addition. But that is a symbol, and in the context of symbols have to have sort of associated meaning already. So it's sort of like just putting down a word. What I'd like us to do is to create a collage that sort of performs subtraction. So perhaps what I can do here is I can start to articulate a more complex composition through the act of subtracting by taking these white pieces and subtracting them from the original large black rectangle. And just so that you know, those white rectangles are just the black rectangles turned upside down. How's that looking? Does this speak to subtraction? Maybe we need to cut out a little bit more. There we go. Now what we have, see, this to me is starting to speak to subtraction a bit, because what it's telling me is now it's looking at when we crop it, and if we were to play with the contrast a little bit, what we have is a whole bunch of little black shapes as opposed to one big black shape with a bunch of little white shapes on it. Because we're kind of subtracting from the black by using artifacts that are the same color as the background. So if I put this up and I look at it, this is starting, and I squint a little bit, I can start to see subtraction. So once again, let's watch that shimmy. Let's hope that that photo took. And what you're going to see next is you're going to see, we're going to switch over to the computer screen and you're going to see what I do with those photos. So stay tuned. We have completed all of our 12 compositions based on the words. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you how to compile them all into a single PDF for submission. So what I can do here is what I have right now, I've just opened up Illustrator, and this is the program that we're going to be using for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And I'll just use this for a very simple task right now. We'll get into the details of Illustrator very shortly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new, actually, you know what, let me close that. I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to say Letter. That looks good. This is set to points. It can be set to inches if you really want. It doesn't really matter today. But what I might do is I might change the number of artboards. You can change this when you're inside Illustrator if you want, but I'm going to change this right now to 12 artboards because you're going to create 12, and so that in essence we can save this as a 12-page PDF. So what I can do now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find the two images, the 12 images if I'm you, that I shot. They're looking good. I could drag them directly in. I can do all sorts of things if I want to in Illustrator. But what I might do is I might actually just bring these into Photoshop first, really quickly, to make a couple little minor adjustments. Let's see. What I'm going to just do is I'm going to use a special tool in Photoshop to basically crop these, and then I might even change the levels a little bit too. Crop. Do the same for this one. We're going to do this with much more precision and much more eye for detail later on, but for today, that's fine. I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to hit escape. I'm happy. I'm going to go to image. I'm going to rotate this image. Actually, you know what? I'm not even going to bother doing that. I'll do that in Illustrator. It's easier to do in Illustrator. And then what I might do is I might just go to image adjustments and change the brightness and contrast. By cranking up the contrast, I'm making this more of a purely black and white composition. And once I'm happy with it, I'm going to click on this tool over here called Rectangular Marquee Tool, or by hitting M. I'm going to hit Command or Control if you're using a PC, and A at the same time, and that selects all of it. Another way you can do it is just by starting from one corner and dragging all the way down so that everything is selected in the marquee. I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to go to Copy. I'm going to switch back to Illustrator, and I'm going to paste it in. It looks fine by me. I can shrink this down. I can move this way, and I can scale it, put it in just to my page, just like that. You'll notice that when I'm scaling, it preserves its aspect ratio. That's because I'm holding down Shift while I'm scaling. If I don't hold on Shift, I can stretch things out and it can look terrible. But if I hold down Shift, it'll always scale perfectly. So maybe what I'll do is make this a little smaller. There we go. Looks good to me. And then I'm going to do the same for this one. Image mode, image adjustments, brightness, contrast. Crank the contrast up, bring up the brightness so that it's kind of becomes just a black and white picture. Copy all of it. I'm going to paste it in here for now. Now the next phase, pretty straightforward. I'll just make it so that they're roughly the same size on the page. You can make additional adjustments if you want to make it so it's it's a perfect square. You can do that, but you don't need to. Excellent. Let's just leave it like that. There's some details that could really easily be changed, but this is for the first assignment, and I would like to get this to make sense, so I don't want to overload you with too much. There's one last thing that I need you to do, and the thing that I'm going to get you to do is I would like you to write the name of the word that you use. So I'm going to click on the text tool over here. I'm just going to click right here, and I'm going to write the name of the text, which is, what do we call this? We're going to call this, which one is this? This is subtraction. And then I'm going to hit escape. And again, it has this bounding box. So if I stretch it, that's going to look weird and that type's going to look bad. So I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to scale it up a little bit. You can leave it the size it is if you want. Now, I don't love that type. I think the default type of Illustrator looks really bad. I'm just going to use a typeface that I like. feel free to do that. And now I want the next word to be in the exact same place on the same thing. So I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to click on this page here so that it's activated, and I'm going to go to Paste in Front, and it's going to paste right there. And I can change this to, what is this? Radiation. Hit Escape. Done and done. The only other thing I need from you, the only other thing I need to add is your name and student number. So maybe I'll do this. Ali S. Kadir. And let's say my student number is 12345. And then what I can do is I can add the same thing here. Ali S. Kadir, 12345. Done and done. Now if I click on this and I click on this, I can move them up a bit. Maybe it'll look a little bit nicer if this was a little higher up. Might even make the text smaller. Change the leading a bit. There we go. You can move them around the page. You can do whatever you want with them. But the point is I want to just be able to see a PDF of all of the collages that you have with the name of every collage on it. Great. So the last thing I'm going to do now is I'm just going to save this. So when I hit Save, it's going to give me a dialog box. And the default form is AI, and we'll work with AI files, Adobe Illustrator, not artificial intelligence. But I'm going to save this as a PDF. And I want it to be all of them, and we're going to just call it whatever you want to call it. Let's do a naming convention. Let's do last name, followed by first name, followed by workshop 1. Let's do that. And then we will save it. And then one last thing, all of this we'll just leave as is right now. I'm just going to click on View PDF after saving to make sure it looks right. And it pops right up. Looks good. Nothing on these pages, but these 2 pages look fine. And my submission is now ready for Canvas. So I look forward to seeing all of your submissions on Canvas. Don't forget to read the assignment very carefully. All right.